The answer to where are the boys is they're dead and they're murdered.
The reality here, man, is 2 little boys went missing. It didn't do enough to show that no one took them. It was wander off or dead.
There are glaring issues in this case that cannot be excused.
It's time for justice.
Where are the boys? That is a question that has haunted Kern County since December 21st of 2020, when 2 small children were reported missing from their home in California City. Good evening to you. Thanks for joining us for 17 News at 6 tonight on this Friday evening. I'm Jim Scott.
And I'm Maddie Jansen. After just 2 days of deliberation, a verdict has been reached in one of the most closely watched trials in Kern County history.
First count. We, the jury, impaneled to try the above entitled case, find the defendant, Trezell West, guilty of felony, to wit, murder in the second degree.
That was the moment late this morning that Trezell West was found guilty of second-degree murder in the death of his 4-year-old adopted son, Orrin West. Jacqueline's guilty verdict on the same charge was announced soon after. But there's a possibility this case is not over. The jury deadlocked on the second count of second-degree murder related to the death of their other child, 3-year-old Orson. That means the district attorney's office could retry the Wests on those unresolved counts. We'll have more on that in just a moment.
We have 17 News team coverage for you tonight. Michaela Armstrong standing by at the Kern County Superior Courthouse. She will join us with family reaction to today's verdict in a few minutes. 17's Marco Torres has more on the boys' journey through foster care. And our Alex Fisher takes a deep dive through this case, starting from day one with a full recap on the years-long investigation. Plus, our Robert Price will have more on how 2 young victims captured an entire community's heart.
But we begin tonight with a breakdown of the verdict. Trezell and Jacqueline West faced multiple charges in the disappearance of the boys. Among those charges, second-degree murder, even though no bodies were ever found. Also, willful cruelty to a child, involuntary manslaughter, conspiring to commit murder, and falsely reporting an emergency. Counts 1 through 3 apply to the older of their adopted boys, Orrin. Counts 4 through 6 apply to Orson, who prosecutors argued was killed in a separate homicide after the death of his brother. Each parent is accused of murdering both children. On the first count of second-degree murder, the jury found Trezell and Jacqueline West both guilty of killing Orrin. The jury also returned a guilty verdict on count 2, involuntary manslaughter of Orrin. On the third count of willful cruelty to a child, the jury found Trezell and Jacqueline West guilty. But here's where the jury could not reach an agreement on 2 of those charges related to the younger boy, Orson. A mistrial was declared for count 4, conspiring to commit a murder, and another mistrial was declared for count 5, second-degree murder. For count 6 of willful cruelty to a child relating to Orson, the jury found Trezell and Jacqueline West guilty. And finally, count 7, false report of an emergency. The jury returning a verdict of guilty on that charge as well. The story of Orrin and Orson West has been an emotional one since the beginning. An entire community rallying behind the search for 2 innocent boys who seemingly vanished without a trace. And while we still don't know where the boys' bodies are, the biological family is taking some comfort in knowing someone's being held responsible.
17's Michaela Armstrong spoke to members of the boys' biological family shortly after the verdict came in today. She joins us now live from the courthouse in downtown Bakersfield with what they had to say. Michaela, good evening.
Jim, it was an emotional day for everybody, particularly for family members, friends, and community supporters of the West boys.
An emotional, long-awaited victory in the eyes of many after the jury ruled Trezell and Jacqueline West were guilty on 5 of the 7 charges against them, including second-degree murder, involuntary manslaughter, and child cruelty. Some even cheering while listening to the verdict outside the courthouse.
Yes!
Once court adjourned, family, friends, and supporters embraced, cried, and celebrated what they felt was something they knew all along since the day Orrin and Orson West were first reported missing in December 2020.
We knew they was going to be found guilty. The story told the truth from the beginning.
Jurors found the West guilty of second-degree murder, involuntary manslaughter, and child cruelty regarding 4-year-old Orrin West, but failed to reach verdicts on second-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder in connection with 3-year-old Orson's death. However, for the family, both being found guilty on 5 of the 7 charges is better than no justice for the boys at all.
When I heard the ones that I really wanted to hear, I was like, thank you, Jesus. He can't give it all to us, but he gave us that main part.
We got 5 charges. They're not getting out.
Right.
They're going to be in there rotting. That's where they should be. They're animals. You know what I mean? They did this to 2 babies, and how can you hurt anything that's babies? How can you hurt children? Like, it's sad.
Yet even with receiving the verdict they hoped for, the family still wants closure that they did not get out of the trial.
We just want bodies, remains, or something. We want proof that, you know, we want their bodies so we can have closure.
Sentencing for Jacqueline and Trezell West is set for July 13th, but the question of where are the boys still remains. Live from outside the courthouse, Michaela Armstrong, 17 News.
Thank you, Michaela. Even after 2 years of intense public scrutiny, we know very little about Trezell and Jacqueline West. Public records tell us Trezell Philip West is 36 years old, and Jacqueline Gabrielle Vasquez West is 33. Prior to this case, they had no local arrest records. In the months after the boys were reported missing, there were dozens of searches and scores of prayer vigils for Orrin and Orson. But Jacqueline and Trezell West never went to them. There were even 3 social media posts by extended West family members praying for the boys' return, but none by Trezell or Jacqueline. A yearbook confirms Trezell was a 2004 graduate of Bakersfield High School. Immediately after Orrin and Orson went missing in 2020, authorities seized the other 4 boys living with the Wests, 2 their biological children, 2 others adopted.
Now, prior to this closely watched trial, Trezell and Jacqueline West were indicted by the Kern County Grand Jury. Little is known about those proceedings, but that's intentional. The rarely used Kern County Grand Jury is made up of 19 volunteers from the community. Most of the time, prosecutors file charges directly, leading to a public preliminary hearing. But when prosecutors instead turn to the grand jury, the panel's proceedings are private. Witnesses can testify without fear of retaliation, and prosecutors can avoid tipping a defendant who might be ready to flee the county. Ultimately, members of a grand jury have the power to bring a criminal indictment. The murder conviction came in the second degree. A second-degree murder charge alleges a killing that is intentional but not premeditated, or a killing caused by reckless disregard for human life. The act may only have been intended to cause harm rather than death. It is punishable by a prison term of 15 years to life. First-degree murder, on the other hand, is defined as the unlawful killing of a human being or a fetus with malice aforethought.
Without a body, proving that someone has committed murder is difficult, but not impossible. The last no-body murder conviction here in Kern County was the case of Daniel Rhodes. Last year, the Caliente man was sentenced to 40 years to life in prison for gunning down William Alford in 2019. Rhodes admitted he shot Alford after he said Alford forced his way into his home and threatened him. Rhodes told investigators he loaded Alford's body into his pickup and tossed it inside a large trash bin off Caliente Bodfish Road. Alford's body has never been found. Test results revealed a bullet fragment found at the scene of the shooting had DNA on it consistent with Alford's DNA profile.
Now, when Orrin and Orson West were first reported missing back in 2020, concerned citizens and businesses pledged various rewards that totaled well over $125,000. But that was an unorganized grassroots effort, and there's no evidence that anyone collected any of that reward money. There were never any consistent conditions on what was required in order to earn those rewards. At one point, even the California City Police Department offered $25,000 for information that would lead to an arrest and a conviction. Cal City Police Chief Jesse Hightower tells 17 News no one ever came forward to claim that money.
The trial began on March 28th. Those who couldn't make it inside the courtroom could listen through an audio stream provided by the court. Public Affairs Officer Kristen Davis told KGET that hundreds of people logged on to the proceedings. The number grew over the first 3 days of the trial, reaching nearly 1,800 listeners by March 30th. With this case being highly sensitive, the judge implemented restrictions for what was allowed to be recorded. But some people disregarded those rules. The court says there were several people illegally streaming the proceedings on other social media platforms.
Criminal defense attorney Tony Lidgett is joining us now in studio tonight with more on the West verdict. Mr. Lidgett was born and raised in Bakersfield and spent over 10 years in the Kern County Public Defender's Office. He specializes in all criminal matters, including murders and violent felonies. He has had over 500 clients, and 92% of his cases have been successful. Mr. Lidgett has tallied a record of 56 in murder cases. Tony Lidgett, thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much.
Coming in. What does the verdict tell us about what the jury thinks happened to these two little boys?
A 4-year-old and a 3-year-old either go missing. I wouldn't say missing. The 4-year-old, 3-year-old, either they're kidnapped or they're dead. The way the jury came back, the jury found them to be deceased. They did not find it as to the younger one, Orson, but when you look at what they found as to Orrin, I believe they took the eldest child's statements and they realized that the kids were no longer here. And there are some skeptical type statements or sketchy type statements from the parents. They put those two things together, and I believe the jury, the only way they can come back and find a guilty on murder is to believe that the kids are actually dead.
Now, the defense made quite a bit of an argument about the coercive interview techniques used by some of the investigators. The jury apparently didn't buy that, huh?
People believe in kids, no matter what. You're going to have a child up there, and this child, I think, was 10 years old at the time of everything. When he gets up there and testifies, and everyone said he did an incredible job, they're going to believe that child. You can bring in whatever expert, whoever you want, but when it comes down to it, we believe kids. We believe kids because we believe kids are still honest, pure. It's not until later in life that sometimes we become not so honest and pure, and maybe our credibility can be judged. But a 10-year-old, I don't see any reason for them to lie, especially when they're going to be talking about their parents. I assume he told the truth, and when he talked about finding or his brother's body being cold, I think that was enough for a jury.
Yeah, the people in the courtroom audibly gasping when they heard some of his testimony, very emotional. Is it unusual to have guilty verdicts in cases where there are no bodies like this, and this evidence is largely circumstantial?
I've done over 100 cases, murder cases, represented clients, and in those 100 cases, I can't think of one where there was no body. I was listening to what you guys were talking about at the beginning, and I guess there was one a number of years ago. But what we're talking about is kids, though, too. Adults, if adults go missing, adults can just go missing. They can simply decide, I don't want to be part of this. They can move.
Check out.
Yeah, check out, go to Utah, go to some forest, whatever, and decide, I don't want to be part of it. But kids cannot. They don't have the means. They don't have the ways. There's only, either they were kidnapped or they were killed. So in this situation, with the kids missing, with no type of video, with no type of photographs from the family from September to December, I believe that was real suspicious. We can all probably pull out our cell phone right now and have pictures of our kids and grandkids and or videos. To not have one even during like Thanksgiving time period is somewhat suspicious. Shouldn't be enough probably to convict, but in the case when we're talking about kids, we're always going to go guilty until proven innocent.
We've got time for one more question here. Sure. The West, Jacqueline and Trezell West, showed little emotion throughout the course of this trial. Do you think that worked against them in the jury's eyes, or do you think they ignored that?
Undoubtedly, it worked against them. Defense attorneys tell their clients to be stoic, try not to do any type of emotion that would draw any type of attention to you. But you're talking about a situation which is emotional. You're going to have your kid up there and is testifying, and the mother did not once break down. I will say, though, I did learn afterwards, after the verdict, that Jacqueline did break down in tears. So maybe she went off the advice of the defense attorney and did everything that she could to do what she thought was right, not to put any attention upon herself, but ultimately it hurt her in a case to where you have to be cold. You have to be callous. If you're going to take the life of a 4-year-old and 3-year-old to be even accused of that crime, and then you sit there the entire time and act perhaps cold in a way, without any type of motion or any type, even want to run up there and hug your kid up there in the stand. Yes, I do think it hurt
It's a
him.
heartbreaking case all around.
Criminal defense attorney Tony Lidgett, we thank you for your insight and your time, sir.
Well, thank you guys so much.
Okay. Well, after the break, our team coverage of the West murder trial verdict continues.
17's Alex Fisher is up next as he traces the timeline in this high-profile murder case from the day the boys were first reported missing to the unanswered questions that still haunt family members and the community. 17 News at 5 o'clock is back in 2 minutes.
We are back now. And the verdict rendered today in the murder trial of Jacqueline and Trezell West is just the latest chapter in the long and sorrowful story of their missing boys. But today's developments are essentially the climax to this suspenseful saga. 17's Alex Fisher has more tonight about how we got here.
They are our children, and so we want them back.
A desperate plea just 4 days before Christmas. Trezell and Jacqueline West report 2 of their kids are missing. It's December 21st, 2020. The Wests claim 3-year-old Orson and 4-year-old Oren had gone missing from the backyard of their home on the edge of the vast desert community of California City.
I came in the house, I saw them there. I went in the house, I came back out, I didn't see them there. I realized that I left the gate open and I panicked.
The couple called police later that night. Officers and neighbors rushed to the house and started looking for the boys, scouring yards and fields.
And that's all I want is to find a baby. And I hit a bunch of corners. I went down this street, I turned my light on, I searched, I called their names.
The next day, the search turned into an investigation. Investigators went through the West home, taking large brown bags full of evidence. The family's van was towed. Their cell phones were seized. Police said the Wests were cooperating with the investigation, but authorities removed the family's 4 other sons to protective custody. The community prayed. They left presents. Family, friends, and strangers all clinging to hope.
We're looking for something to do. Look, some way that we could step up and do something with the community. And right now, the only thing that we can do is give gifts because they weren't able to get gifts on Christmas.
Police continued their search. They dug up vacant fields. They used ground-penetrating radar to search for bodies, but nothing.
What I do truly believe is that night, there's no way that they could have got out of that the neighborhood without some sort of assistance from an adult.
Police wouldn't say who that adult might have been, but a week later, the exhausted chief was more blunt.
I can't comment on that, whether I think they're alive or not. I do suspect foul play. We haven't been able to put together, how the boys got out of the yard or where they've gone.
4 months later, the Bakersfield Police Department took over the case. BPD said they had more resources than the 21-officer California City Police Department. After BPD got the case, investigators followed up on leads, some of them leading to massive searches.
I expect that there will be more searches. There's been numerous interviews, numerous search warrants, and that will continue until we know what happened.
Nothing was turning up. The community was getting worried, but still remained hopeful.
These boys will be found. They will be brought home.
Community contributions poured in to create a reward of more than $100,000. Prayer vigils were held. People gathered to ask God to return the boys safely. Trezell and Jacqueline never attended any. Then, a year later, a stunning development.
The investigation has revealed that Oren and Orson West are deceased. The investigation has also revealed that they died 3 months before their adoptive parents reported them missing.
Trezell and Jacqueline West were indicted by the grand jury on charges they murdered the boys. Hours before his arrest, 17 News tracked down Trezell West at a post office in Edison. He took off in an RV west of Bakersfield, and that's when police caught up to him and made the arrest. For 14 months, people asked, "Where are the boys?" Now, they were asking something different.
The question is now, where are the boys' bodies? We want to be able to bring them home and, give them a proper burial.
Trezell and Jacqueline West pleaded not guilty.
It feels good, though, to see them sitting there handcuffed in those brown suits or whatever. You know, that's where they belong.
The trial went on for more than a month. Witnesses said they hadn't seen the boys for months prior to them being reported missing.
Ultimately, the answer to the question of where are the boys will be answered. It's that they're dead. And at the end of the case, I will ask you to return a verdict of guilty beyond a reasonable doubt as to Trezell and Jacqueline for the murders of Orrin and Orson West.
But the pivotal testimony came from the West's eldest biological child, who claimed he saw 4-year-old Orrin's body at the family's home.
They let him die.
The defense argued that police focused on the West from the very beginning, ignoring other possible suspects.
This was a tragic accident, is what the evidence will show. All right? They don't have an answer for it because it was tragic. But instead, Trezell is here on a murder charge.
We are saying that, honestly, anything could have happened, right? They were abducted. We don't know. And to be quite honest, if we knew the answers to that, we really wouldn't even be here.
The question remains the same. Where are the boys?
17th, Alex Fisher reporting. KGET has followed this case since the very beginning. For complete coverage on this case, including today's verdict, just head to our website, kget.com. Your time is 5:23. The mysterious lives of little Orrin and Orson West were tumultuous, to say the least. The toddlers pulled from their home by Child Protective Services and placed in foster care early on.
And by most accounts, their young lives were tormented by abuse. Our Marco Torres up next with more on the joyless journey of Orrin and Orson West when we come back in 2 minutes.
Where are the boys? The question at the center of the West murder trial. 17's Jason Katowski is in the courtroom with every detail from the trial. Stay with 17 as we deliver reaction from the verdict. Where are the boys? The West murder trial on 17 News.
Welcome back. We continue now with our team coverage of today's verdict in the murder trial of Trezell and Jacqueline West. The story of the West boys has had many twists and turns over the last 2.5 years. But as 17's Marco Torres reports, the troubles for these two little boys started long before they were ever reported missing.
Orrin and Orson West, as we know them today, weren't born with those names. Their birth names were Sincere with a C and Classic Pettis. Sincere was born on August 4th, 2016, and Classic was born June 11th, 2017. The boys were born 10 months apart to Ryan Dean and Charles Pettis. When Sincere was 3 months old, according to court documents, he was taken to Memorial Hospital for crying uncontrollably. It was discovered his leg was broken.
I was at work. I noticed my baby cry wasn't normal when I got home, and I took him straight to the hospital, and they say he had a femur bone. His femur bone was broken and twisted for it.
Kern County Human Services suspected abuse and placed him in emergency foster care. A month later, he was placed in an established Bakersfield foster home operated by a woman named LaToya Spry. Dean, his biological mother, visited him multiple times a week as she fought to get him back, according to court documents. 6 months later, Dean gave birth to her second child. She named him Classic. Classic went home with Dean, but 11 days later, he was removed from the home based on suspicions about what happened to his brother. He was reunited with his brother in Spry's foster home. During the murder trial, Spry testified the boys were removed from her home in 2018 after her daughter went to school with a scrape on her leg. Abuse was feared. There never were criminal charges against Spry, but the boys, then about 1 and 2 years old, were removed from her home and placed with Trezell and Jacqueline West.
They got taken from an abusive home and put into an abusive home.
The Wests renamed Sincere Orrin West, and they renamed Classic Orson West. In 2019, the boys were formally adopted by the West family. The next year, in December of 2020, both Orrin and Orson were reported missing by Trezell and Jacqueline West. They were 3 and 4 years old. Marco Torres, 17 News.
The tragic mystery surrounding the disappearance of Orrin and Orson West captured the hearts of not only people here in Kern County, but of complete outsiders around the country.
Our Robert Price is next with some observations on why this murder trial was so closely watched from far beyond the borders of where we live.
We are back now and recapping our top story tonight at 5 o'clock. Trezell and Jacqueline West found guilty this morning. on 5 of 7 counts in the murder of 2 of their adoptive children, toddlers Orson and Orrin West, whose bodies have still not been found. Among the guilty verdicts, second-degree murder, involuntary manslaughter, and willful cruelty to a child.
2 of the 7 counts ended in hung juries. Today's verdict does not quite close the book on this 3-year ordeal, but it brings us to the doorstep. And 17's Robert Price reports it's been a roller coaster, not just for the boys' biological family, but for the entire community.
Some trials go beyond exercises in justice that are confined to the participants and their immediate families. Some trials reach into the community and touch us in ways that other trials just can't. Such was the case with Orrin and Orson West, boys who never got a chance to become who they might have been, victims of an imperfect system that, for all the good it does, still has shortcomings.
How does one trial seize the attention and the passion of so many people for such a sustained period? How did 2 young victims, unknown to virtually everyone except their closest relatives, capture an entire community's heart? Mark Anthony Raimondo, a local defense attorney who has followed the trial closely but is not connected to it, says it's about the unique legal challenge of this case and about the innocence of these boys.
I think the combination of factors, number one, 2 little children, the nature of their disappearance, also the fact that there were no bodies, presents some unbelievable challenges to gain a conviction. So it has both the legal aspect of interest and also just the heart is also grabbed.
A recipe for public fascination and empathy, no question. The search for the boys, the investigation, the lead up to the trial took many twists and turns, but public interest never seemed to wane. Angel Lee, who has been in the courtroom for most of the trial, said it was, again, about the pure innocence of the young victims.
So it started from California City back to Bakersfield, where it originated from, and then boots on the ground out here in Bakersfield. And just, the hearts of people around the world had love for these 2 little babies.
Now we wait for sentencing and for a decision by the DA on whether to retry the 4 charges, 2 per defendant, left unresolved.
2 defendants, 10 guilty verdicts. Is that closure? That's a question each of us will have to answer in our own way. At the Kern County Courthouse, Robert Price, 17 News.